Hello and welcome to the fourth Devo deep dive training. And we will begin in about 5-ish minutes. My name is Tim Ramsey. Also with me is Greg Childers. And together we will be presenting on alerts and how alerts can be used in the Devo platform to notify you when something occurs, some condition is filled. So again, we will start in about 5 minutes. Hello and welcome to the fourth of the Devo deep dive training sessions. Today we'll be talking about alerts. With me is Greg Childers, and we will go ahead and get started. I just wanted to say that, one, this session is being recorded. The recording will be made available to you after the session ends. And two, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A window. And Greg or I will do our best to answer them. And if we can't answer them, congratulations, you've stumped the trainer. We will find out the answer and then get back to you after the session. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Greg. Take it away, Greg.
Thank you, Tim, and thank all of you for attending this Devo Deep Dive session. This is session number 4 in the series, the last one in the series, until we do another series, I guess. But that's where we are. So hopefully all of you have attended some of the previous sessions. If you have not, I know that there is a plan to make the recordings available to everyone. You just have to request it, and then we'll get your name on a list so that you can get recordings of the previous 3 sessions. But as Tim said, we're going to talk about alerts. And in this course, we'll talk about, alerting for different types of events, how to create triggers for your alerts, how to configure your alerts, how to set up sending policies, how to set up anti-flooding policies, how to create alerts based on the volume of alerts you already have. There's a lot of things we'll cover, and we'll go ahead and get started. Also, as Tim said, if you have any questions, we've got a Q&A window that you can use, and you can direct your questions there. If you don't put them there, I won't be able to see them, and Tim won't be able to see them because, quite simply, this is a one-way communication. We can't hear you. All right, so if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A window, and we'll get to them in a timely manner. So the topics we're going to cover for today's deep dive session, first of all, alerts. What are they? We'll discuss notifications. We'll discuss the permissions you need, because everything inside of the Devo platform is permission-based. We'll talk about how you can create new alerts, the different methods for triggering those alerts. There are quite a few of them, and we'll go through each and every one of them. We'll actually walk through an example of how to create an alert based on triggered alerts. And I'll actually create an example where I create a alert, and then I will trigger the alert so that you can see it actually kick off. We'll also talk about managing the alerts that are already there, sending policies, delivery methods, anti-flooding policies, and also just managing your triggered alerts altogether. And we'll also go into things like alerts visualization. But without further ado, we will go ahead and begin. So, what the heck is an alert? Well, when you are using the Devo platform, it is ingesting a massive amount of information. And, it's impossible for one person to just sit there in front of a console all day long and just monitor every single thing that's happening. So it's kind of nice to be able to get a notification that something is going on when it happens, right? As opposed to you just staring at the screen hoping that you'll be there at the exact moment it happens. Alerts are going to be based on different search criteria. And these search criteria can be set up 2 different ways. They can either be done in real time, which is a continuous search. It's looking for things as they're happening, and it will send you an alert when it happens. You can also do a scheduled alert. These are going to be based on specific number of events during specific time frames. Right? Like, for example, you could say, I've got an alert set up for the first example, a real-time alert. I need to know when this process completes on this server. And it'll just send you a notification of it. Or for a scheduled one, you might say, I need to know, for example, how many unsuccessful login attempts were made between this time period and this time period. And if it exceeds this number of invalid login attempts, send me a notification of that, because something's going wrong if we're having that many invalid login attempts. All right, so they'll be triggered whenever the search condition or threshold is met. And you have to define that in advance. You can set up a query that can search for those conditions and then use that as the basis of your alert notification. All right, the queries can be as complex as possible. I mean, you can make them very simple if you want, like literally just say, show me everything in this table. Probably not the best basis of a query because it's going to generate a massive amount of data. But if you take your query and you put in things like filters, if you put in grouping, if you put in aggregation, if you do data enrichment on it, and come up with a more fine-tuned query, you'll probably get more meaningful results out of your alerts. Now, when you're creating a query, there's 3 main things you got to think about. First of all, what do you want to track? You want to track the number of invalid login attempts. You can do that. You just have to figure out, specifically what data tables you're going to have to access and specifically what criteria you're going to have to use. How often do you want to check for these events? Again, we can do real time where you're literally notified as it happens, or you can do a scheduled alert where you have to have a certain quantity of events happening within a specific time frame. Also, how do you want to be notified? I mean, there's several different sending policies that we can set up depending upon what technologies you have available to you. So those are some of the things we're going to discuss in this webinar. All right, so let's get into a little bit more discussion about the alerts themselves. All right, what is an alert? Well, as I said before, an alert is just a task, and it's going to monitor active queries and look for specific conditions to be met. And when those conditions are met, you're going to get an alert notification based on how you have it defined. Right? These alerts can be delivered to individuals. They can be delivered to servers. They can be delivered to groups. They can be done in real time. They can be done at set intervals. You have to be careful with the real-time ones. Typically, when you're creating a real-time alert, you want it to be for things that are out of the ordinary. They're not going to happen that frequently. So when they do happen, the fact that you're being notified about it will get your attention. If it's a query that's set up as the criteria for your alert, and it's something that happens all the time, then you could get bombarded with notifications. All right, so may have to go in and tweak it a little bit. Now, let's talk about the different use cases. All right, you can use it to troubleshoot systems. If you have a server that crashes, or if you have some process that fails, you can set up an alert so that when that process fails, it sends you an alert notification. Right? You can also do it to proactively discover problems or incidents. Like, for example, if we're transferring data back and forth between a server and a client, you want to know approximately how many bytes of information have been transferred on average for a specific time period. Right? You can see, things like, oh, this is a high traffic time, and it's exceeded what we would consider to be quote unquote normal. Maybe we need to take a look at it and see what's going on before the amount of data being transferred leads to performance degradation, for example. We can also use it for incident or security incidents. If something goes wrong, like, for example, I mentioned, invalid login attempts. If we're having an excessive number of invalid login attempts, it could be because it's a 3-day weekend and people just always forget their passwords over a 3-day weekend. Or it could be because we came up with a stronger password policy. Or it could be that somebody's just trying a brute force attack. All right, so that's something that we can take a look at. Another thing that we can use is network or data security. We can check and see if there are, unusual packets being transmitted on the network that really shouldn't be there in specific network segments. We can look at things like fraud or insider threats. I mean, we can easily filter our data for, internal devices, depending upon what IP address range we're using. We can use it to dramatically reduce application downtime because we can get notification as soon as it happens, or we can get proactive notification that performance has been degraded so that we can work on it as quickly as possible. We can use it to free developers from time-consuming production support because, we can spot things, as I said a moment ago, either as they happen or proactively before they happen. Right? And that way the developers don't have to constantly go back in and monitor things, when they can be doing more important things. We can use it for intrusion attacks or attempts on your system. If there is a major breach, we can look for specific criteria that we have defined as a breach. We can use it for server crashes. All right, obviously those would be very bad, and we want to triage that as quickly as possible. Incorrect operations on your applications. If there are errors being transmitted, we can grab that and see what's going on. Errors, exceptions, or inactivity detection. If you have services that are not being used for a significant period of time, you can keep track of that as well. It could be that the service has failed. It could be that the connection to the service has failed. It could be that the back-end data is not accessible for the service for it to work properly, or it could be that they're just not using it anymore. Right? So a lot of different scenarios that you can use for creating alerts. Now, the key steps to creating alert. All alerts start with a query, right? Whatever your query is, you are looking for specific information in your data. And you can use all the different operations inside of your query. You can do filters if you need to filter it for specific events. You can use grouping and aggregations. If you need to group a large quantity of events, you can use the aggregations to do some type of calculation like a count or an average. The example that they use in the slide deck, if the CPU idle time is less than 98% for a 5-minute period, trigger an alert. All right, that might be pretty useful. All right, so create the query. That's where it always starts. Go to the navigation panel, go to the data search area, and build your query. Choose your tags so that you have your data table, and then get to work. Right? Once you've created it, then you can use it for alert creation. Right? Once you've got your initial data table, you can create an alert. In fact, any table that you can use in the Finder can be set up as the foundation for an alert. All right? The data then can be handled and used over and over and over again. Now, we also need to talk about notifications. What is a notification? All right? These are messages generated by Devo whenever certain events have occurred. If you've been using the platform, you've probably seen notifications pop up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen at various times. Right? I know I see them all the time when I'm using it. You can also see your notifications in the navigation panel. There's actually the navigation area in the notification panel. You can go to the notifications area, and you'll see a list of all of them. In fact, let me log in to the platform, and I will share my screen. So give me just a moment here as I log in. All right, you should be seeing my screen very soon. All right, so as I said before, the notifications you can find here on the left-hand side on the navigation panel. If you click on notifications, you can see all these different notifications, and you can click on each one. Here's one, new data has been sent. Here's a lookup notification, apparently several of those, and you can see how long ago they were posted. Right? So those are available to you. All right, let me switch back. Now, in addition to this, if you have not checked the notifications area in a while, on the navigation panel, you will see a number listed next to the notifications that will tell me how many notifications you have not yet seen, right? If it says 999, it could be more than that. That's the number where it tops out. But when you click on it, you will then see all of the notifications that are in that area. Right now, as far as permissions are concerned, to be able to define an alert, you have to have a role with management permissions on the alert configuration and also on my alerts or any of the subcategories. Right? So in the permissions for your role, you have to have those management permissions for alert configurations. Without those, you won't be able to configure an alert. Again, you will also need it in the alerts area and the different subcategories. Without those permissions, you will not be able to create nor manage alerts. All right? It's just not going to happen. All right? So make sure that you have that permission minimum in your user role. All right, but again, to create an alert, you go to your data search window. You literally click on data search. You pick the tags necessary to create your virtual data table. And from here, then you can start adding the elements to it, the different operations to it, things like filters, grouping, aggregation. You can even do data enrichment by adding additional columns to it if necessary. whatever you would normally do in the process of creating a query. Right? Then you can turn that that query into an alert. The easiest way to do this is to use the new alert button on the operations toolbar. All right. And you will see it looks like a lightning bolt. When you click the alert definition button, it will open up the new alert definition window. All right. You can give it a summary, which is a brief explanation of what it will be doing. When you're looking at the list of alerts, you can actually see the summary of it. You can put in a more verbose description of it, for greater clarification. You can assign it to a subcategory. You must assign it a name, preferably something short and sweet, so that you will remember what it is when you're looking at it and trying to find it in the list, basically. And you will also set a priority for it. Now, there are several different categories of alert which you can also set. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, once you've done that, you click the Create button, and that will create your alert. All right, once the alert is created, you can then look at all the alerts underneath the administration panel on the navigation panel. There is a section called Alert Configuration. All right. Now, if you have not gone in and assigned it any policies, what it will do is it will assign it the default sending policy. You can modify the alert and you can assign it a different sending policy. All right. The default policy will be defined by the administrators. If you would like to assign it something else, you will have to go in and you'll have to create a sending policy or assign it a policy that already exists. But we'll get to that in just a moment. Now, let's talk about the different types of alerts. All right, the first alert we've got is called the each method. And when you click the new alert definition button, you will see this new alert definition window. Again, summary, description, subcategory, alert name, priority. Across the bottom, we see 4 different categories. The first one you see is called each. Each is a pretty straightforward type of alert. With this one, you will get one alert notification every single time its criteria is met. I mean, every single time. And that's why I was warning you earlier about being careful that you don't create a query that's going to produce a metric ton of notifications, because that would obviously be bad. All right, you want to make sure that you are doing it for things that are going to be infrequent. I mentioned the example before when we had a server crash. That would be a good example of when to do it, because every single time you have this event occur that meets the criteria of that query, it's going to trigger that alert and send you a notification. All right, when you're monitoring things like a server, right, for specific events like a server crash, this would be a good example of doing it. All right, if I get a notification that the server crashed, that's not something that's supposed to happen on a frequent basis. And in a case like that, I probably do need to get a notification as soon as it happens. Right? Pretty straightforward stuff. All right. Next, we've got the several method. All right, the several method, which is right next to it. This is kind of an interesting one. This will trigger an alert when any given number of events occur within a specific time period. Right? So let's say that I've got a specific time period set up, and I want to know that, let's say, I've got an external web server that's in the DMZ, and it's got an X number of, hits during a specific time period. If it exceeds that threshold and has an irregularly high number of hits, I might want to have notification of that, because I want to make sure, 1, we don't have any performance degradation, and 2, I want to make sure we're not experiencing some type of distributed denial of service attack. All right, obviously that would be a bad situation. So looking at potential malicious activity, especially resource depletion types of incidents where you're having denial of service attacks, that would be a perfect time to use the several method. All right, we've also got the low method. All right, the low method is similar to but not the same as the previous method, because this one is not looking for exceeding a threshold. It's looking for not exceeding a threshold. We have a threshold defined for a specific time period, but if that time period goes by and we haven't had that threshold exceeded, that will trigger a notification. It just means an exceptionally low number of events have occurred, and that's unusual. All right, so a situation like this might be a heartbeat event. You know, when you're getting devices and they're communicating with each other, their status on the network. And if we don't see that heartbeat within a specific time period, we need notification of it because one of the devices could have been knocked offline. All right, it's entirely possible. All right, the next one we've got is the rolling method. Now, the rolling method is another fun one. This one triggers an alert for each event that matches a query conditions, except for one thing. It's only going to check it at user specified intervals. All right, the each method does it each and every time it happens, regardless of the time period. The each method is not necessarily time-based. It's happening in real time. If it happens once, if it happens twice, if it happens a million times, if it happens right now, if it happens 5 minutes from now, if it happens an hour and a half from now or 2 days from now, each method is going to catch it each and every single time. The rolling method is just going to check it at specific configurable time intervals. All right, an example of this, we have to do grouping of events using a no time-based option. If you do not group it this way, this alert type will not appear. In fact, when you're looking at the different alert types, the ones that are available will be based upon whether you have your query doing grouping by time, or no grouping at all. All right, so you will see the options change depending upon the grouping or non-grouping that you may or may not be doing. All right, you won't see the same options every single time. For example, let's see, I'm going to pull up, let's see, a pretty simple example and share it with you. Give me just a moment. All right, it should be popping up on your screen. So if I just do a simple query, all right, demo, e-commerce, data. And it's going to generate some data for me. There it is. All right, lovely. And I just go to the new alert definition. You'll notice that I've got the options of each, several, and low. All right, each doesn't care. It's going to trigger each and every single time it happens. Several, only a single alert when several events occur within a specific time period. You would specify the time period. You would specify the threshold. All right. Low is only going to do it if fewer events occur in the time period. So you set your time period and you set your threshold. Now, let me go to a different query that I've created. And this one actually has some grouping done to it. When I click on the new alert definition window here, I've got different options. I've got each, which is available for both grouped and non-grouped, deviation, gradient, and rolling. All right, so depending upon whether your query is grouped or not grouped, you will see different options for the types of triggers. All right, let me switch back. Now, there's some that we still haven't talked about. The next one we've got is the deviation method. All right, the deviation method is kind of a cool one. This will trigger an alert every time an aggregated value of a single grouped element is significantly higher or significantly lower than the median value every single time it's grouped. All right, so I could have a a grouped query, say for example, I want to know all the times that users from this subnet access a specific service, and I have it grouped by subnet. If it seems to be pretty steady, and their average, access to this service remains within a small range, it's not going to trigger. But if we should suddenly have a spike in activity or a sudden drop in activity that is significant enough that it exceeds the median value by a certain amount, that would trigger an alert. All right? Something has significantly changed, and it requires further investigation. All right? This is great for monitoring tasks where a data pattern matters. We expect this kind of activity. It should be in this range. This should be the median for this specific type of activity. If it far exceeds the median, either high or low, that's something we need notification on so we can do further investigation to maybe determine the cause of it. All right, the next one we've got is the gradient method. And the gradient method is very similar to the deviation one. It's not the same, but it's similar. All right, the gradient method will also trigger an alert every time an aggregated value of a grouped element varies significantly, but not from the median this time. It's going to be when it varies significantly from one grouping period to the next grouping period. All right, it has nothing to do with the median. You could have activity that is gradually growing over time, which means the median will be changing. If it's a slow, steady change, the gradient method will not trigger because it's not had a significant jump from the previous grouping period. All right? But if it does have a significant increase or decrease from the previous grouping period, that would be an indication that it will be triggered, and that will actually trigger the alert. It's again used for monitoring patterns over time, but we're more concerned about the previous period than the median period. Now, the main difference between deviation and gradient, right? As I said, they're very, very similar. They're looking at monitoring activity over time, grouped activity over time. The deviation method is looking for a variance from the median. The gradient method is looking for a variance between one reporting period and another. And you get to set the time-based groupings for them, if necessary. All right, so what I'll do is I'll show you an example. Let me back up one. I'll show you an example of creating an alert and actually triggering it. All right, so let me switch screens. All right, give me just a moment here so I can pull up this lovely live demonstration for you. So what I'd like to see is how many times someone is trying to access a specific service, but they are, finding, say for example, a web page service, and they're coming up with a page not found error. All right, now there's several different ways to do this. I've got a data table that I'm going to look at. It's the one called SIM Log Trust Web Activity. And here it is in all its splendor and glory. This is everything. And you can see the event date. You can see the different usernames of who's connecting. All right, I can see different host address, right? Methods, URLs, header information, refers. Plenty of fun data in there. I can even see information about geographic information, country, region, city, ISPs, organizations. It's a pretty good table here. Now, I'm going to add some additional filters on it. All right, so I'm going to filter it down just a wee bit. First one I'm going to do is I'm going to do a, let's see, I'll do a filter where I'm looking for a specific URL, one that is incorrect. And I'm just going to make this one up. I'm going to do an alert testing URL and see how many people type it in exactly like this. All right, alert testing. And I run that filter. I'm going to put in a second filter. And this filter, I'm going to apply to the headers. And for the headers, I'm looking for specific headers of X, Devo, .cid. Awesome. Now, I mentioned that you could do one grouped or not grouped. I mean, if I just did it as is, I can do an each alert, a several alert for a specific time period, or a low alert. But if I do grouping on it, all right, say, for example, I want to do grouping, and I'll do it for a shorter time period because I want to actually trigger it so that you can see an example of it. I'm going to set it to 1 minute, and then I'm going to throw in some additional grouping criteria. I'm going to group it by username, and then by, let's see, source host, and then by country, then by URL, then by, let's see, refer, and user agent. And I'll do grouping. And then finally, I'm going to do an aggregation on it. And the aggregation I'm going to do is a count. All right, so I just want to do a count, and the count I'll do a count of, I'll just do a count. And finally, I'll do one more filter. Where the count that I've just added be greater than or equal to, I'll say 2. All right, so let me expand this a little bit so you can see the actual query that I've built. All right, so from my table, sim log trust web activity, I put in 2 filters. Look for the URL alert testing. All right, I'm going to copy that because I'm going to use that in just a moment. I'm looking for every instance where somebody is trying to go to this site, but they type in the URL that ends with alert testing. All right, that's not an actual valid location on this website, so it's going to generate a page not found error. All right, it's going to group it every minute by username, source host, country, URL, refer, user agent. It's going to do it every minute. It's going to do a count and then filter it for the count being greater than or less than 2. All right. Now, if I just run it as is, I don't see any results. I'm going to do it with the real-time option turned on so that it's constantly monitoring. All right, constantly monitoring. And just to get a trigger on it, what I'll do is I will go to a specific location and I'm going to try and trigger it. All right, http us.devo.com/ and I'll paste that alert testing. And it says page not found. Now, I only did it one time. So it shouldn't pop up because I said I need to know anytime it is greater than or equal to 2. And so far it's just running, and it's not finding anything. All right. Now, if I go back to the page and I hit it a few more times, you know, hit it, 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 go back, assuming that I don't have a typo somewhere, it should be able to spot it in just a moment. Oh, there it is. It found me with my username. It found the URL, the one that I typed in, which was incorrect. And it said I did it a total of 5 times in that 1 minute period. Right? So all alerts start from a query. Now from this, I can go into the new alert definition window, give it a summary, give it a description, give it a subcategory, give it an alert name, set a priority, and then choose whether I want to do an each for each and every time that it exceeds those 2 invalid login attempts. I could do a deviation, I could do a gradient, or I could do a rolling. All right, for this one, probably just want to do an each. You know, every time it exceeds 2 invalid attempts to hit this page in a 1 minute period, give me a notification. Unless someone is just sitting there hitting refresh nonstop, it should not be generating a lot of traffic. All right, but you never know. So I would give it a short description, you know, something pretty basic. Summary is, this is an example alert. And the description for it, I could put in $ username, and it will show the username. And then $src host, $country, visited, $URL, $count, times within a 1 minute interval. Maybe throw in a little bit more, refer, and just tell them who the refer is, refer. It's going to look really bad if I mistype something. User agent, be $user agent. And again, I can create a subcategory for it, you know, doing monitoring. I can give it a name, and I'll call this one Greg _ sample _ alert, and then click create. Click Greg alert. There we go. And then click create. And give it just a moment while it is creating it. All right. Now, to see it in the list, I can go to Administration and Alert Configuration. And here you can see all the alerts. You just go through the list. There's mine down at the bottom. I created a monitoring alert. Ta-da! The sending policy is the default sending policy. If you hover over your alert underneath the administration panel under alert configuration, if you hover over your alert and click on the little icon for the paper airplane, you'll see all the different sending policies that are available. And if you already have another one that you want to assign to it, you can assign it. You can see several of them are already predefined in here. But if you don't assign it one, it will use the default sending policy. All right, so that's where we are. Now, the different policies that are available, we'll get to that in just a moment. So those are the different types of alerts. But again, your alerts are going to be based off of whether they are grouped or not grouped. All right, let me go back to the data search and just look at some of the ones that I've been showing you earlier. All right, here's an example of one that is not grouped. And if I create an alert, it gives me the options of each, one for every time it happens. And this would probably be terrible for this data because it's not filtered at all. It's literally got thousands of lines in it. We've got the second one, several. You know, when several events occur within a specific time period, I might want to set that rather high and then set a high threshold for it, or set this low and set a high threshold for it. We've also got low, you know, if fewer than these events happen within this time period. All right, I can do those. But if it's not, if it's a one that's already got grouping added to it, like the one I just did, you're going to see these options. Each, for each and every time it happens. Deviation, which means it is exceeding the median. You know, and you can specify the threshold. You can do an absolute violation of the threshold of the median or a percentage violation of the median. Same for gradient. All right, but this one is not looking at the median. It's looking at the previous grouping period. And then there's the last one, rolling. All right, this one's going to run at regular time intervals and then check it for the trigger conditions. This one requires some non-time-based grouping. It will not let me have this as an option because I did a 1-minute grouping on it. All right, that's why this option is not available to me. It literally will not allow me to use this grouping option. All right. Now, as an added bonus, you can, and I'll switch back to my slide deck. You can also run an alert based on the number or types of alerts that have already been configured. This is sort of like a meta version of monitoring something. You're monitoring the active alerts. Now, to do this, you would need to go to the data search area and your base table that you would create for this. All right, would be, all right, sim, log trust, alert, and info. This table has information about all the different alerts that have been triggered. And now you can create an alert off of the triggered alerts. All right, it actually gives you that capability. All right, so let's say that you had a bunch of monitoring alerts set up, a bunch of each alerts, and they only happened when specific events occurred, you know, bad things that you don't want to happen, like security incidents or, you know, processes failing or services failing, something like that. And you've set up multiple each events. You could go to this data table and then set up another alert saying, hey, when any of these categories of alerts occur, send me a notification if any one of them happen. All right? And I could direct this alert to go to one party, whereas the individual alerts that it's reporting on could be being sent to someone else. All right, someone else entirely. Yeah, so kind of a little process we got going on there. All right, now that being said, you would go through the same standard process to create a new alert and the triggering method that you did when you were creating the other alerts. There's nothing special about this data table other than the fact it contains alert data. All right, you don't have to do anything different. You create your query like you normally would. You would select your tags, get your data table. You could do your data enrichment. You could do your filtering. You could do your grouping. You could do your aggregations, and then create a new alert based off the data in this table. All right, and that could be pretty useful as well. Now, from this point, once you have your alerts created, I did mention a sending policy. All right, we're going to get more into this during a little bit later part of the discussion. All alerts need a sending policy. The sending policy is basically going to define when to send it and whom to send it to. All right, we have to do that. We also have an anti-flooding policy. An anti-flooding policy is set up so that it prevents you from receiving an excessive number of alert notifications within a specific time period. You know, those each alerts that I mentioned before, if they're not filtered properly, you could get a massive number of alerts just jamming you. An anti-flooding policy would prevent that from happening. All right, the delivery method has to be chosen because that's going to define how it's going to send the alert and to whom. You can send it via email. That's a very easy way of doing it. I get alert notifications in my email all the time. You can do it via Slack or various other methods. You can send it to a person. You can send it to a group. You can send it to a server. All right, however you want, but you've got to have some type of delivery method. After that, you have to have a sending policy. You know, the sending policy is going to basically dictate to whom, when, and how often it's going to be sent. And there is a default sending policy that's associated with the domain. When you create an alert, it has to have a sending policy. All right, and since you haven't necessarily defined one yet, there has to be a default policy in place so that it will just automatically pick it up when no others exist. You can change it, all right, once it's been assigned that default policy, but it will be defined the default sending policy at the top. I usually tell people don't change the default sending policy because there may be multiple alerts that are using that default sending policy, and if you change it, you're changing it for all of them, all at the same time, all right, because they're all using that same sending policy. If you need a sending policy that's different than the default, we'll show you how you can create your own sending policy and then how to go back to your alert and change it from the default to your custom sending policy. All right. Now, that being said, we've also got the anti-flooding policy, which I said before, it's going to limit you from getting jammed, right? Because you could theoretically get jammed, especially if you have something severe happen, like a unusual uptick in activity or a, malicious attack from distributed denial of service. That's a pretty common example. And if you get an excessive number of notifications within a short time period, I'm sure none of you want to get your email inbox jammed with notifications that all of a sudden take up, 3/4 of your inbox because something is happening at an excessive rate. You can set up an anti-flooding policy which can sort of put the brakes on it, and it's going to determine how often those messages will be distributed. Right? That way you don't get completely bombarded. Now, we will go into all of these. We will go into the delivery methods. We will go into the sending policies. We will go into the anti-flooding policies. But for right now, what we'd like to do is take a short break. We've been going for a while, and we're going to give you a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we will discuss further the different policies that you can apply to your alerts, how you can manage your alerts. You can even see a visualization of all the alerts that have been triggered. But we'll cover that in just a few minutes. So just looking at the time, I've got 20 past the hour. We'll come back at 25 past the hour, and we will continue on from there. All right, enjoy your 5-minute break. We will return in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. For the next part of the presentation, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Tim Ramsey. All right, Tim, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm taking it away. We're going to talk about. Here we are. We're going to talk about managing alerts. Managing alerts, as Greg said, along with everything else in the platform, requires that you have appropriate privileges. And privileges in the Devo platform are role-based. So a role is defined, and privileges are enabled or not enabled for that role. And then the role is assigned to you, or you are assigned to the role, whichever way you want to think of it. And you have the privileges that the role assigned to you grants. By the way, you can have multiple roles assigned to you, more than one, and it's additive. So as long as any role permits, then you can do whatever that action is. So managing alerts requires that you have the appropriate permissions granted to your role, the role that has been assigned to you. And switch to the there we are. Let me switch to the domain. So as an example, the roles in this particular domain, every domain ships with an admin role and a no privileges role. The admin role grants all privileges. No privilege grants no privileges. You can define additional roles, and best practice would be you should define additional roles if you are managing the domain. If you're not managing the domain, then you just need a role that gives you the permissions to manage the alerts that you need to manage. And you'll note that the permissions are two types, manage and view. And you can think of manage as write only and view as read only. The admin role, as I said, has all permissions, and you can't change that. So you cannot go into the admin role and turn off permissions. What you can do is clone this role to a new role, and then in the new role, turn off the permissions that aren't necessary for that new role. And also some permissions, if you have manage, you must have view as well. So if manage is enabled, view will also be enabled, and it will be grayed out, like all of the permissions here are grayed out. And note that the permissions are very granular. There are several different delivery methods that an alert can use, and so you can have permissions to manage or simply view. And in this context, view would be use a particular delivery method. You can also have privileges assigned to you to mark an alert that has triggered as read. I've already dealt with this alert, or mark it as unread. I wish to no longer have dealt with this alert, so it will still be available for somebody else to deal with. And when looking at alerts, we're going to administration, alert configuration, and we can see, since I'm logged in as a privileged user, a user in the admin role, I can see all of the alerts that have been created within this domain. Depending on the privileges that your role assigns you, you may only be able to see specific alerts or only your alerts. There are several subcategories that can be defined if you have the permission to define a subcategory. Otherwise, if you have the permission to create an alert, you may be constrained to only create an alert in this particular subcategory. A couple things to note here. I'm going to pick on this last alert. This alert is in the My Alerts subcategory. Subcategory usually doesn't matter. It's more for sort of housekeeping. But in some cases, subcategories could matter. A couple of the applications that can be enabled on the Devo domain, they're looking for alerts in a specific subcategory. Note the alert type column here that tells you, without even having to look at the alert, how it's triggered. And all three that happen to match my filter criteria here are triggered every time the query that the particular alert is built upon. Every time that query returns any sort of output, every line of output individually causes that alert to trigger. And then you can see the notification policy assigned to that alert. Mine, the one at the bottom, has the default notification policy, and you can manage that by clicking the little paper airplane icon here, which will take you to the notification policy of that alert. Also, alerts can be disabled. This alert is disabled. It's a toggle button. If you have permission, you can change to enabled or disabled. A disabled alert is not ever going to trigger. The query for that disabled alert will not be automatically run. And there's also a 3-button icon here that, again, with the proper privileges, allows you to delete an alert, clone an alert, and make changes to the cloned alert. And you can edit an existing alert. Some things you can't change when you edit: the category, subcategory, name, things like that. I would also note the summary and description of this particular alert is using, I call them variables, which refer to specific columns that are being returned by the query that this alert is based on. And so since this is an each action, we're triggering this alert for every line. So individually, each line of output that this query returns, the alert will trigger, and the value in the username column will be substituted for $username in the summary. And then in the description, with several variables, username column, source host, source IP, CC for country code, URL, count, refer, and so on. That can be very helpful. The summary and the description show up when you view the alerts in the platform. They are also included in the notifications. However the notification is being delivered, the notification will contain the summary and description. Priority here, there are 5 levels of priority. The default is low. And so one way that you can consider the priority is, who do you wake up when this alert triggers? Very high, maybe that's the director. High, maybe that's the team lead. Normal, maybe that's the on-call person. Low, we don't wake anyone up, we just get an email. And very low, we don't even get an email. The platform logs that this alert has triggered, and okay, great, we have that recorded somewhere. Don't need a notification for very low. And you can also see the query that a particular alert is based on in the link form, the raw underlying query language that the platform is using. And this particular query, I would note, does do a grouping. So we have a grouping element here, and it's time-based every 5 minutes. So that limits the possible trigger methods, the trigger criteria. As Greg was saying, some of the possible trigger criteria require that your query not be grouped. Or alternatively, maybe some of them require that if it's grouped, it not have a time interval specified, while other criteria require that it must be grouped, or it must be grouped with a time interval, and one or two require that it be grouped and you do an aggregation such as this select count, that is an aggregation operation, is retrieving information from the grouped data. The grouped data is summarized data. There were originally 200 rows of data. I have summarized it down to one row for you. That's much less output for you to read. But perhaps I would like to get some information from those 100 rows that were summarized. And the most basic information I might want to get is how many rows were summarized. And the count operation will do that for you. A couple, or at least one, of the triggering methods require that you provide an aggregated numeric value. And so aggregation requires that you have done a grouping operation. So you have to have a grouping operation applied to your query, and then you must retrieve an aggregated value, a numeric aggregated value from the query output, and then that must be provided to the alert triggering method specified. This column has the numeric aggregated data, and then that is used to calculate whether or not this particular alert should trigger based on this data that was returned by the query. There is an edit and data search window option here. And that takes you to the original query in the web user interface. And you can still see the link version of the query by clicking there we are, the query code editor icon. And you can make whatever updates that you needed to make, but I'm going to return back to the alert. And now I want to talk about the notification methods. So an alert has one sending policy, and by default, when an alert is created, it uses the default sending policy. If you want to use a different sending policy, after you create the alert, you have to go edit the alerts sending policy by going to administration, alerts, and then clicking the paper airplane icon and choosing a different sending policy. So the sending policy must have been already created and configured. The sending policies are available in this Alert Policies tab. I'll come back to that. I wanted first to show the various delivery methods. The actual delivery method or methods used by an alert to let you know this alert has triggered is controlled by the alert policy that has been assigned to the alert. But what are the various ways an alert can tell you I have triggered? Well, basic way is just send an email. So this uses the Amazon Simple Email service. So you will get an email from Devo.com saying this alert has triggered. Actually, when you first create an email delivery method, you have to click on a link that will be sent to you to opt in to receiving alert notifications. Just to make sure that the email address that you specified is an email address that would actually welcome alert notifications. So I can create a new email delivery method. Specify an email address for it. And then I can specify time zone. What's the point of the time zone? We'll talk about that. So time zone is I'm personally in the Chicago time zone, or close enough, Central time zone. And then what language do I want the notification information to be specified or written in? Devo's headquartered out of Spain, so I have a couple of other options, and then English, so I'll go with English. I can choose to attach events that triggered this notification, triggered the alert that is causing this email to be sent. So for an each, okay, I would get one, but if I had some other trigger option selected for the alert, there may be multiple lines of query output for one instance of the alert being triggered. And so I can specify how many lines of query output I want attached. And in this case, just stop it at 50. And it tells me there's already a Tim Ramsey. That's okay. You can actually see that here. And I've already filled it out the same way. Other delivery options include push. You have to specify, you have to provide a HTTPS web server that provides a certificate signed by a certificate authority the Devo platform trusts that will accept an incoming connection from the Devo platform over HTTPS, and then will speak JSON, JavaScript object notation, and REST, representational state transformation. I think those are the buzzwords for those icons, which is a very standard set of, not exactly a protocol, but a standard set of how to format the exchange between some client and some server through an application programming interface, an API. In this case, the Devo platform would be the client, and the server that you have provisioned somewhere out there would be, well, the server. This provides a way, if you have some third-party product that you would want to actually be, where you manage or where you monitor alerts that have triggered, you can have the Devo platform push triggered alerts out to whatever third-party product this is. You have to specify a couple of things, provide a couple of pieces of information, including the API endpoint. What URL are we connecting to? And then how are we going to send the data? And right now, JSON is about the only supported method. Now, how are we going to authenticate? And so you can choose, I want you to authenticate with standard username password. It doesn't have to be a traditional username password. It could be some sort of authentication token identifier and authentication token secret, or identifier and secret all in one, rolled into one token. However this is specified, the authentication information will be sent through the HTTPS tunnel, so in theory should be secure. We also integrate with other third-party products, Service Desk, Jira, Pushover, PagerDuty, Slack, ServiceNow, and perhaps others could be added in the future. All of these third-party products, these are a push from the Devo platform to the third-party vendor. Typically requires some sort of setup. For instance, Slack requires that you provide a webhook, which the administrator of the Slack deployment, the Slack for your company, would generate a webhook URL, which encodes in the URL a token that says this is a trusted connection from this remote source, in this case, Devo. So you would get the webhook URL, paste it here into this dialog, and fill out the rest of the form. And now when an alert triggers, we could send an email, we could do a push out to some third-party application, and we can also notify you on Slack, whatever Slack channel you want. So take-home point here is that when an alert triggers, you could have one notification method used, say an email, or you could have multiple notification methods used. Send a page to somebody, send a message in a Slack channel, send an email, and push something out to this third-party application. And it is the sending policy that decides this. So, as I said, by default, an alert will use the default sending policy. So what's the default sending policy? If we scroll down a little bit, this is the default sending policy. And this is the Devo 101 domain. And everyone in the Devo 101 domain has elevated privileges. And so everyone can set the sending policy they just created as the default. It's sort of a free-for-all, and so this person made their sending policy the default. I have a sending policy. I think it's a very good sending policy. If we look at it, this sending policy says, I want you to send me a notification via email. I have one delivery method defined. Send me a notification via email if the event has triggered between the hours of 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. One of the reasons I became a technical trainer, I used to manage enterprise level deployment of stuff, but getting paged at 3 o'clock in the morning got a little bit old. And as a technical trainer, I very rarely get paged now for emergency training. And so that's reflected here in my sending policy. If it's not Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, don't bother me. Tune it for your particular purposes. Also, this is where that time zone setting comes in. I told it that my personal time zone is U.S. Central, and so it does the time zone conversion to figure out, is it 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. where Tim lives? If so, okay, fair game, send him an email. But you can have multiple delivery methods. So I also want a Slack message sent, and there's no JSON delivery method defined at this point, but you could have multiple email delivery methods and then other delivery methods that have been set up, specified in this sending policy. The sending policy also has an anti-flooding policy, which Greg was talking about. The anti-flooding policy is very simple. It simply says, stop talking to me after this many events in this amount of time. So you can send me 5 notifications using the notification methods that I specified, email, Slack, and maybe an HTTPS push. You get 5 of those in an hour and then stop. I get the point. Now, what happens to all of the other alerts that might have triggered in that 1 hour interval past the 5 that I said you can notify me about? Well, those still trigger. I personally won't get email, but they're still being logged, and you can see them here in the alerts area of the platform. So this alerts area shows all of the alerts that have triggered within the last month. I believe the default is 1 day, but I had selected the last month, and so you can go out all the way to the last year, which is going to show you a lot of alerts. Now, I mean, in a production environment, you would not hopefully have unread alerts that that are a year old. I mean, you would have somebody whose job would include going through the list of alerts and triaging them and deciding what to do with each alert. So, one thing I could do is mark all alerts. I just clicked the top little checkbox here to select all alerts. I could mark them all as closed. They're no longer brand new, so they would not show up as 999 brand new, unlooked at alerts. I can also just remove them. They're no longer listed here at all as unread, watch, or anything. And I can also just add an annotation, just a note to all of these saying that these alerts are great alerts. And just annotate them all. And all of these, was mad at me because I left the actual memo field empty. So all of these will have that annotation applied, and you can see here there's a little one icon saying, hey, somebody has added a note to these alerts. Also, this timeline here will show you a count of alerts over time. And we zoom out. Looks like somebody has gone in and cleaned up the alerts, and they're all around, even though it says there's 999 alerts, they all happened within a very short amount of time today-ish. But I mean, if you have alerts that haven't been totally deleted, they're still present, you can see those alerts in this timeline zooming out. If I select an alert, by clicking on its name, I will see all of the occurrences of that alert. What it does is it puts in a filter to show me only alerts with that name. So I'm seeing this particular alert has triggered many, many times, and looks like it's triggering repeatedly. Also click the little 3-dot icon here and add a filter for this alert. This filter is sort of a post-trigger filter. If this alert triggers, I can specify some action to automatically be taken when this alert triggers and any additional criteria are satisfied. So this is an excellent way, for instance, of automatically handling nuisance triggers of an alert. The alert is there to tell me about important stuff. However, this particular IP address is causing this alert to trigger again and again and again. I've investigated. It's a false positive. Now, perhaps I should go in and edit the alerts query so that that IP address isn't causing it to trigger. Certainly. But I can also automatically handle the triggered alerts, at least here. It's still going to send out its notifications, whatever its sending policy says to do. But here in the platform, I can automatically resolve those instances of the alerts by, for instance, marking them as red or deleting them or changing their status to a false positive. And I could specify if it is this. And it's hard. Source IP is that IP address. Then I want you to mark it as a false positive. And I have a post-trigger filter done up that will automatically perform that action when that condition, the source IP address is 1.2.3.4, is fulfilled. So I talked about sending policies. I'm going to be fast forwarding a little bit through here. Right, so I'm going to. I see a question in the Q&A, and I'm going to try to answer it for everybody. How do the Devo GUI alert priorities correlate with Devo email alerts? So in Devo, priority high equals 7. That's a good question. Actually, I'm going to have to get back to you on that because I want to make sure I answer that correctly. Unless, Greg, if somebody else has that in the tip of their brain, feel free to answer. So person asked that question. That's a good question. I see there are 5 alert priorities, very low through very high. And there are more possible values that you can get in the email. So it may depend specifically on your situation. So I will have to get back to you on that. Okay, I talked about managing alerts under administration alerts, and then how each alert, when created, is assigned the default sending policy. But actually, when you create an alert, you'll get a little notification in the top right corner telling you that if you want a different sending policy, you need to go manage the alert and change the sending policy. And if you click on that notification, it will take you to this area of the platform, managing alerts. You still have to find your alert by, for instance, filtering for it, and then click the paper airplane icon, and it will take you into the sending policy area, the sending policy part of administration, where you can select a different sending policy. And in a typical domain, you would not have 6,000 sending policies. So it should be much easier to find the same policy that suits you. Greg had an excellent point. The default sending policy, do not change that without careful consideration and consultation with all the stakeholders, because that's the default sending policy. If somebody did not go in and edit their alerts configuration to use a different sending policy, they're using the default, don't assume that you can just change it and not affect others. So sending policy, excuse me, sending policy allows you to specify multiple delivery types and methods. Delivery type and method are one and the same, essentially. So email to this address, a Slack notification to this channel. You can have as many as is needed for this particular alert. Also in the sending policy, you specify the anti-flooding policy. The anti-flooding policy causes a throttle on the notifications, email or what have you. While I'm thinking of it, I had talked about the HTTP JSON delivery method, where it's a push from the platform out via an API server that you provide. There is an equivalent pull. The platform has an alert API, which you can find more about in the documentation. So if you have a client that you want that can be configured to reach out via a standard API call and retrieve alert events, and you want to manage your alerts in that client, you can set that up as well. Instead of having the platform push it out, you can have your client sign in to the API server that Devo provides. And again, it's a standard RESTful interaction using JSON for the data exchange. And then credentials, there are options for that. The client can reach into the API server and retrieve information about triggered alerts. One thing I would note, by the way, is the anti-flood policy is applied to the HTTP JSON push. So if you have in your anti-flooding policy 50 events and then stop, when the platform pushes out to your API server, it will send 50 events per hour per alert. If you have your client reach into the platform via the API server and pull events, the API server doesn't know and doesn't care about the anti-flooding policy here. So if there were 17 million instances of the particular alert triggering, you will have 17 million different discrete events waiting for your client to pull. Anti-flooding is currently not applied to the API calls, so it's just an FYI. You can manage the sending policies, you can manage the delivery methods, you can manage the anti-flooding policies, including delete. If you delete a sending policy that's in use, the alerts that are using that sending policy will revert to the default sending policy. So permissions, oops, I went one too far. Permissions, as I showed you this, permissions are required to use the various delivery methods, email, HTTP, and so on. So what that means is when you are setting up a sending policy and you want that sending policy to send an email to somebody, you need to have the permission to send an email. It doesn't get as granular as send an email to this address. The granularity is you have permission to cause an email to be sent, or you have permission to cause a Slack interaction or an HTTPS interaction, etc. So you need view permission to see those delivery methods, but actually use those delivery methods, it requires manage permission. Somebody asked, how can I get the free t-shirt mentioned in the email? That is a very worthy and important question. How do I get the free t-shirt mentioned in the email? That is a marketing person question. The marketing people are off doing other marketing things, but that question has been archived, and the marketing person will be getting back to you. Person that asked that question, would you please provide a contact email address? It's probably, you already signed in with an email address, so they probably have it, but if you would just add another QA question with your email address, we'll make sure that we have the proper email address to contact you. So yeah, you can configure, assuming you have the appropriate permissions, you can configure a delivery method for any of the delivery methods on the left-hand side, email, HTTP, Slack, PagerDuty, etc. Important things to note here, the specifics of the delivery method, of course, depend on which delivery method you've selected. With email, whatever email address you specify is going to get a setup email saying you need to click here in order to complete essentially subscription to these notifications via email. The time zone is used in the sending policy if you choose to restrict the hours and days that the notifications can be sent. And then you can optionally have the up to some limit of lines of query output that caused this particular alert to trigger this time attached to the email. So when you get the notification email that this particular alert has triggered, there'll be an attachment which you can open. The attachment will have the query output, or first X number of lines of query output. that caused the alert to trigger. And it works for the other delivery methods, not just email. So if you have Slack, for instance, the Slack channel gets up to, say, the first 50 lines, whatever you configured in the Slack delivery method. Anything else? Talk about all these. Anti-flooding policy, pretty straightforward. Managing triggered alerts, again, requires a view privilege to change the status of triggered alerts, delete triggered alerts, add the post-trigger filters, etc. All of those require managed permission. And Greg talked about the magic tables, sim.logtrust. Devo's original name was logtrust, and so that's sort of hard-coded here in places. Sim.logtrust.alert has at least 2 fourth-level tables: sim.logtrust.alert.info, sim.logtrust.alert.error. Sim.logtrust.alert.info gets a line of data added to it every time an alert triggers. Sim.logtrust.alert.error gets a line added to it every time a triggered alert encounters some sort of error. And that some sort of error could be, I tried to use this webhook to deliver a notification to the Slack channel, and I got an error message back from Slack. I didn't like that. So here's an error. It is common to have defined an error that is monitoring, say, sim.logtrust.alert.error. And it's not uncommon for there to be errors. It could be that an email is now bouncing. It could be that some sort of trust relationship has expired or has been revoked. And by monitoring entries in this sim.logtrust.alert.error table, you can get notified about it in a timely manner, and that's a perfect thing for an alert. So what we have are meta alerts, alerts about alerts. I've also seen instances of customers that have written alerts looking at sim.logtrust.alert.info. Is there a huge spike in the number of alerts that are being generated? So if I see that the number of alerts being generated in some time interval exceeds some threshold or has gone up by some percentage, then I want an alert about that. It's just, again, I'd like to be proactively notified that this thing is happening. Talked about filtering alerts. And yeah, the alert area that I was showing you didn't really have a pretty graph because the alerts were very much bunched together. But you can see the rate of alert triggers over time by looking at the alert area of the platform. And so the graph is there by default. You can specify the time range for the graph. And it is sometimes interesting to see in that graph that over this particular range of days, there was an elevated amount of alerts or there was an unusually low amount of alerts. And sometimes that's weekends. Weekends we had we expect to see less utilization of, say, employee laptops and desktops. So alerts about employee activity were lower during the weekends and holidays and that sort of thing. Again, that's where perhaps monitoring the sim.logtrust.alert.info table can be useful. You can get notifications that, hey, things are unusually quiet right now. Maybe that's a good thing, or maybe something's broken somewhere. I showed all this. And the alert icon on the left-hand side of the web user interface will have a little bubble showing you how many unread alerts are currently there. And the new unread alerts, excuse me, show you how many since you last looked. As I said, you can change the status of an alert. You can do it manually or via a post-alert filter. So once you have identified an alert that maybe there's an automatic action that should be taken under certain circumstances, click the little 3-button ellipsis icon for that alert and add a filter. If it matches this additional criteria, say source IP address or what have you, take this action automatically, which can be, again, a really handy way of dealing with specific alerts that don't really require a human. A human has already decided that this particular case of this alert can be triaged automatically, so we can let the platform do the triage. Talked about sim logtrust alert.info, sim logtrust alert.error. And so we start the whole alerting process by writing a query. I suppose actually we start the whole alerting process by asking ourselves, what is it I want to be notified about? So maybe I have a web server. I want to be notified if the web server is returning an unusually high amount of error response codes, HTTP response codes, or simply an unusually high number of interactions, request response interactions have occurred, or even an unusually low amount of interactions. And again, that could mean that it's a holiday. It could mean that something's broken somewhere. So all of these are things that I might want to be notified about. How do I format a query so the output of the query allows me to decide, has this thing that I want to be notified about happened or has it not happened? So, for instance, an example of I have a e-commerce website, for instance. I want to be notified if the number of interactions from clients out there on the internet is unusually low. Well, what I want is a query that returns a count of how many interactions have occurred in some interval. Maybe that interval is 5 minutes. Maybe that interval is 1 hour, whatever interval is appropriate. And then I use that as the basis for a new alert. And then my alerts matching criteria could be if the number that I'm getting back is lower than this, then I want you to trigger. Once I've done that, created the alert, then I need to go in and possibly change the sending policy for the alert. If the default sending policy is suitable, then great, I'm set. Otherwise, I need to choose the appropriate sending policy. And if there isn't an appropriate sending policy, maybe I need to go create the correct sending policy. And if the sending policy doesn't have the delivery methods available that I think I need, then maybe I need to go set up the delivery methods. Once I have the delivery methods set up, create the sending policy and possibly a customized anti-flood policy, and then edit my alert to use the customized sending policy that I have created. So I've talked about all that. I'm just going to fast forward through these. We are fast forwarding. Yeah, so it just depends on the particular delivery method, what details are needed to send it up. Email is the simplest. You just need an email address and you need to respond to the email by clicking on the link that is provided in the email. For the other delivery methods, it depends on the delivery method. And as they show here in Slack, a Slack administrator, I believe it requires that you are an administrator for the Slack area, needs to create a webhook. And the webhook is just a unique URL that in the URL there is a token that authorizes whoever is visiting that URL to send a message to these channels or these users. So talked about the alert area of the platform that allows you to see alerts that have triggered, allows you to manage alerts that have triggered. So this provides really all of the necessary functionality for managing your alerts, including triaging alerts, annotating alerts that require follow-up. So I could, for instance, annotate that, hey, Tim, you need to look at this alert. And then Tim can be filtering for alerts that mention me. So when I see an alert that matches my filter, alerts that say Tim, then I can visit the alert, open it up, review the details of the alert, take whatever sort of response I believe is appropriate, whatever mitigating actions or remedial actions this particular alert tells me I should take. And then once I've done that, I can update the status of the alert, or I could pass the hot potato. Actually, this isn't Tim, this is Greg. So I annotate the alert, hey, Greg, over to you. And then Greg has a filter, and Greg handles the alert. So the platform here provides the basic necessary functionality to manage alert lifecycle from when they're triggered to essentially retiring the alert. This alert is not anything that we need to worry about anymore. It can be closed. It can be, we can move on from it. And oops. Here's another view of alerts that have triggered, just selected from the icons up at the top left. In this case, give me a sort of a picture diagram of alerts over time colored by the number of alerts in that particular time. So if it's been a very slow alert day, we'll have a cool color like blue. If it's a really hot day, then we'll have a hot color like red. So it gives us a really quick way of visually identifying when there's been a lot of alert activity. And a lot of alert activity could just be that, well, it's a Monday, or it could be that we're under some sort of attack. And I already showed annotating alerts. So that's it for alerts. Any other questions? If you have any other questions, you can send them to myself. My email address is tim.ramsey, R-A-M-S-E-Y @devo.com. I'll do my best to answer them. Or you can ask your customer service manager, documentation. Or I'd like to give a shout out to the brand new Devo community, which is being rolled out. It may not be rolled out to you yet, and if that's the case, coming soon. But the brand new Devo community is going to be a way that you can interact directly with Devo and other customers to ask questions, look into best practices, get the latest news, and so on. So, question: is ActiveBoard different from the alerts that we're discussing that we're discussing in this training? That's a good question. Both ActiveBoards and alerts are based, or the widget, the particular graphic in an ActiveBoard, they're based on a underlying query. And with alerts, sort of there's a background process that runs the query for a particular alert, gets the output from that query, and then compares that to the alert's matching condition. And if we satisfy the alert's matching condition, then the alert formally triggers. We write an entry into the SIM-log-trust alert.info table. We run the various sending method, delivery methods specified in the sending method. We have logged it into the platform, so it shows up in the alert area of the platform. all of that. With an active board, a particular widget runs a query. Generally, it runs it when you are loading the active board, and then perhaps reruns it at some interval as you have the active board loaded. And you could certainly reuse the same query. The query that's driving this alert is the query that's driving this particular widget. The widget can also, by the way, be running in the background. If you create an aggregation task for a query that is being used in some active board widget, the job of the aggregation task is essentially to run that query in the background. So when you visit this active board, when you load this active board, the widget has the data it needs immediately. Because if you do grouping on a timed basis, so take this query output, group it over a 30-minute interval, essentially what you're saying is wait 30 minutes for all of the data in that 30-minute interval to show up. And then once we've got 30 minutes worth of data, then do whatever the rest of the query says with that 30 minutes of data, and then start over on the next 30-minute interval, which means that you're not going to get data except on these 30-minute intervals. And if I load an active board and a widget is doing a time-based query in this 30 minutes, I may have to wait 30 minutes for that widget to actually have any data to show me. It's just going to sit there with no data. That's not a great user experience. So we can create an aggregation task that runs in the background. And that aggregation task will essentially be pre-populating the data that the widget needs. When I load the widget in this active board, it starts up with the latest data that it has from the aggregation task. And that can be a much better user experience. And I had a good suggestion. Show you what I'm talking about with the Devo community. So 1 second. So community.devo.com. This is the Devo community. It requires that you log in in order to, I guess, read, write, interact with the community. Post and so on requires that you logged in. But the big thing here is the interactive aspects of this. So if you have a question like, hey, I just attended this deep dive and Tim said something, didn't make any sense to me. Can anyone explain? You can post your question here and you will have all sorts of Devo people all over your question answering it as soon as possible. So that's one of the selling points here of this community is, number one, the company is very involved in this, and we're monitoring this. And if any of us have something useful, I guess, to respond with, we will respond. So this is another alternative. If you have a question or you just want to get somebody's opinion or what's the best way to do this, the community is offered as an alternative. So community.devo.com. And don't see any more questions. So we are coming up on the end of our time. Again, if you have any more questions, well, community, or you can email them. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you all for coming and attending this. And we'll go ahead and stop there. So have a good day.